Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jake, the main host of College Football Red Zone, coming in for another episode of the Spring Deep Dive series where I take a look at all 138 FBS teams from that 50,000 foot perspective, give you an idea of just some key transactions that happen in the transfer portal, as well as some other guys that I might be excited about, as well as give a record prediction for each team that does make up the FBS subdivision in college football. And we pick things up today with our 127th pick. And while we are typically been avoiding the USA teams because they have not been they don't have a revised schedule out. We're moving under the assumption right now that Louisiana Tech is going to be part of the Sun Belt. So a lot of the CUSA schedules are likely going to change between now and the start of the football season. At the same time, though, I will say this. That exception could be made for the New Mexico State Aggies, who come in as my 127th team, so because they do not have Louisiana Tech on their schedule. So one last thing that we have to worry about from that aspect. So hopefully you guys and been enjoying this series. If you do, make sure you hit that like button as well as hit that subscribe button as well. Because a lot of work goes into making these videos, and so I would truly appreciate it if you would give some love to the series by doing both of those things. Then comment your thoughts down below. I would truly appreciate that as well for any feedback. The first time that I'm doing this on YouTube, because I did this previously last year on Twitter only. So I'm happy to bring it to the YouTube atmosphere as well. But let's go ahead and jump into this conversation about the New Mexico State Aggies, who do come in as my 127th ranked team in college football entering the 2026 season as of how things stand going into spring ball. Now, this New Mexico State football team is led by Tony Sanchez, who's trying to right the ship after some, I guess, somewhat recent slash brief success from Jerry Krill, who took New Mexico State into a competitive football team before Krill ended up retiring and ends up becoming an offensive assistant at Vanderbilt, taking both Diego Pavia and Eli Stovers with him famously. And since then, Tony Sanchez, going into year number three, has just been trying to get back to at least middle of the road relevancy within the Conference USA. And to give him credit, when he arrived here at the start of the 2024 campaign, this was a team that was gutted in the transfer portal as a result of that Jerry Krill retirement. And so while the Aggies have not been to a bowl game since Tony Sanchez has taken over as the head coach, at the same time, this is a program that's trying to trend in the right direction. They won 3 games in his first year. And then last year, doing slightly better. They won 4 games. They're getting a little bit better year after year. But that next conventional step would be hitting that 500 mark and hitting that qualification requirement to getting to a bowl game. And that's where we're going to see a little bit of a challenge this year for the Aggies, because this is one of the more difficult places to win at in college football. And as such, they did end up losing more than what they ended up breaking in from a productivity standpoint in the transfer portal. For example, they lost 2 of their really good weapons in Donovan Valpole, their wide receiver, who's now going to Arkansas, playing under new head coach Ryan Silverfield, someone that absolutely is capable of cracking the starting lineup for the Arkansas Razorbacks in the 2026 campaign. But that was not the only weapon that they lost as well. Gavin Harris, the tight end for this Aggies team last year, quietly one of the better receiving tight ends in the G6 last year, over 530 reception yards in the 2026 campaign. Well, he's no longer going to be part of the program either because he transfers over to Georgia Tech. So the Yellow Jackets are very excited to have him. And then Colorado, plain and simple, they took multiple defensive pieces as well. Ezra Christensen, who is an interior defensive lineman, for example, 11 TFLs, 6 sacks, which is really good production for a defensive tackle. Well, he is now part of the Colorado Buffaloes team. And then the same could be said for Tyler Martinez, one of the key linebackers for the Aggies, could start for the Colorado Buffaloes in 2026. And the same could be said for Needham Mitchell, the safety who had almost 100 combined tackles and 3 interceptions in the 2025 college football season. So, some key defensive pieces that they're going to need guys that have already been in the building to step up, as well as trying to figure out how to replace some of that offensive weaponry that they had, particularly in the passing game. Now, I do think that the running back room at least is going to get an upgrade in comparison to last season, though, because James Jones is now a New Mexico State Aggie, and he had an incredible year under Jackson over at Delaware State, over 1,000 yards from the line of scrimmage, rushing and receiving combined, 9 touchdowns as well for the MEAC standout. So James Jones, if there is a name to watch on this New Mexico State football team, that is absolutely a name that you need to look out for moving forward. But it's gonna be a tough climb because I look at New Mexico State holistically, and I want to hope that New Mexico State can get back to relevancy and get to a bowl game. It's just going to be tough because I just don't think that the roster is at the same level as it was last year. I actually think they took a little bit of a step back just in terms of the pure roster talent. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a path for New Mexico State, even for as low as I am on them, having them barely hovering ahead of the 130s in terms of my rankings. I still think there's a path for New Mexico State to get to a bowl game and possibly surprise some people if the development does happen inside the building. Let me pull up the schedule real fast to let you know what I mean. Now, for the most part, this non-conference schedule is going to be a brutal one for the Aggies. Florida State, Hawaii on the road, and then New Mexico at home. New Mexico nearly making the Mountain West title game. I don't think it's realistic to say that the Aggies are going to win any of those games. So no surprises there. We do, for the first time, however, see that we have a safe win, and that is when the Aggies host Mercyhurst, an FCS program, in the second game of the season. I do feel good enough saying that there's enough for Tony Sanchez to work here in year number 3 that it would be a legitimate surprise if Mercyhurst is able to travel to La Cruces, New Mexico, and beat this Aggies football team. But then you also get into Conference USA action as well. And outside of the Western Kentucky game, I do have Western Kentucky very highly regarded. And a little bit of a spoiler here, I do have Western Kentucky at least as my highest power rated team in the Conference USA going into this season. There's still a lot of competitive games in here, right? So Sam Houston, for example, that may be a road game, but Phil Longo still needs to prove himself as a head coach. Ever since Casey Cure left, this program has taken a step back, so that's considered a winnable game. Delaware on the road, the cross country road trip might be a little bit of a hard sell. It's right on the edge of toss up games, but we did see that Delaware still has a margin of error that they need to navigate. So that's a game that they could win. Jacksonville State, they just lost some of their best players in the transfer portal as well. Mid Tennessee State, just not really that high on Derek Mason. And then Liberty also needing to right the ship. Missouri State has a brand new head coach. And then FIU is a team where solid first season under Willie Simmons, but was that lightning in a bottle, or are we going to see a little bit of a regression to the mean? So if everything breaks right for Mexico State, I am pretty low on them from a record perspective, but there is absolutely a world in place where, yeah, they could finish 8-4 and possibly be in a position to play for the Conference USA Championship, depending on how everything else shakes out throughout the rest of the conference. It's just, I think right now, I just don't think that Tony Sanchez has enough to go ahead and make that happen. And now you do go 2-10, if it's they actually finish close to what I'm predicting, then maybe you start going from Tony Sanchez being on the warm seat to now being on the hot seat. So that's what I'm looking at for this New Mexico State Aggies football team, at least in the springtime. We'll see if anything changes as we get closer to actual games being played in August. We'll have a revised list in July. But that's where I stand right now on New Mexico State, a 2-10 football team. But if there's developments happening across the board and it's borderline significant development, you're talking about the Aggies possibly playing for the CUSA championship. There is that upside there. Does Tony Sanchez have that in him? We'll see. But I will say this: if he does finish 8-4, like my ceiling suggests, regardless of what happens in that CUSA championship, I think Tony Sanchez should be considered the coach of the year in the Conference USA. So that's what I have for the Aggies. Definitely let me know down in the comment section what you guys think of New Mexico State football going into the 2026 college football season. But with that being said, appreciate you guys tuning into this video, man. If you love this series, make sure you hit that like button as well as the subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new. With that, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.